Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcasts, Stitcher Play, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. And today, we're going to have a very interesting discussion. And before we have that discussion, I am having a technical issue. Give me 1 second. Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out via SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and now iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. And today we're going to have a discussion that is very relevant to the situation and condition of Black people, very relevant to what's going on today amongst our people. And also we're going to look back at similar things that are taking place in our history that we have forgotten about. And so we can make a connection between the past and the present and see how many times we've been played as a people, how our movements have been infiltrated, and indeed how some of the movements and organizations that we think are for us really aren't for us. BB Fahodier, the Sister Misty, she's in the building. Looks like Sister Misty is the first one in the building. Appreciate Sister for checking in. And as I was saying, we have to look backwards. Have to do a little Sankofa. We have to look backwards to look forwards. And so we're going to explore what I call ASTROTURF movements and revolutionary cosplay. And when I tell people that was going to be the title, most of the time people give me a confused look, or if I tell them on the over the phone or something, they say, I can almost hear the question before they ask it, and they're like, peace to Sister Sandra, and they say AstroTurf, and I realize AstroTurf is an old term, but what AstroTurf is, for those that don't know, AstroTurf was a synthetic substance developed, I guess, in the 60s, and it was used on in stadiums, in sports stadiums, as a replacement for grass. And the thing about AstroTurf was that it was hard. It was dangerous. Sometimes people would get their feet or their cleats stuck in the seams of AstroTurf. People had injured their knees, and there was a guy that blew out both his patella tendons playing on AstroTurf. And eventually they did away with AstroTurf because it was so dangerous. Now you're going to ask me, what does that have to do with what we're talking about today? Well, the reason I use the term AstroTurf is because it was so dangerous. And because it was something that looked like grass, but was not grass, and that the people who played on it often were destroyed, the same way these movements that we've had that look like grassroots movements. They tell us they're grassroots movements. They tell us that these movements are for Black people. And these historical organizations are for the advancement of Black people. But then when we search in their history, the reality is that not grassroots, they're not from the people. Many times they're not even started by Black people, but yet we're told that they're fighting for our rights. And we're going to talk about some historical groups that many of us know about. Some of us may have forgotten about because they become irrelevant. And then we're going to come up to the present day in time with groups that we all know about now that are very famous and that have resurfaced after being forced underground by, indeed, the research done by people like Straight Black Pride movement. So let us get into some of these historical Black, quote unquote, movements and organizations and how they were founded. And then we will see the connection between what happened then and what happened now. Now, one of the groups I'm going to talk about, one of the organizations I'm going to talk about, is an organization that's been around for a long time, but we don't think about it as much now. But during the 60s, at the height of the 60s, was a very relevant organization. And this organization was known as CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. And CORE was founded in 1942. But what I didn't realize is that CORE evolved out of a European pacifist group known as the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And out of the 50 original members of CORE, there were 28 men and 22 women. But out of these members, only 1/3 were Black and 2/3 were white. Now, what is relevant about CORE is that CORE was one of what was known as the Big Six groups, civil rights groups of the 60s. And these included CORE, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, NAACP, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and A. Philip Randolph was one of the Big Six at this meeting, and he has represented multiple groups, and we're going to really get into him, and his history is very important. And this Big Six really were seen as the legitimate leaders of that time. And these were the people that the president at the time, Kennedy, and the president after him, Johnson, and the president before Kennedy went to as the representatives of Black people. And that's the reason why I'm bringing this up, so we can understand that these are people who were in essence negotiating on behalf of Black people. But as we see with CORE, the founding group of one of the groups that was negotiating for Black people was an organization made up of mostly white people at its founding and came out of a white organization. So we have a white organization in blackface negotiating for freedom with other white people, supposedly on our behalf. And then we wonder why we don't get anywhere. So that is one of the groups. Now, here's another interesting point. One of the people that helped put this together, remember this name, because this name is going to keep coming up over and over and over again during this discussion. One of the people that helped set it up behind the scenes, and it was said that he wasn't a father of the movement, but more like an uncle, was Bayard Rustin. Now, remember that name. Many of you know about Bayard Rustin. Some of you may not. The reason Bayard Rustin is important is because if we keep looking at the history, he'll keep popping up over and over and over again in these various civil rights movements. For example, and I didn't know this, Southern Christian Leadership Conference was not conceived by Martin Luther King. Southern Christian Leadership Conference was actually conceived by Bayard Rustin, and he went to another pastor to try to get him to head it. And that pastor suggested King, and then Bayard Rustin went down to the South to get King to organize the SCLC. And then Bayard Rustin kept himself around King. And those who know the history, when King's house was bombed, he had armed guards at his house because the KKK, they didn't bomb his house. They burned a cross on his lawn. And Bayard Rustin was the one that came and told him that he couldn't have armed people protecting him. Now, let's think about this here. Martin Luther King is married and has children at this point. Here comes a man that's telling you to not defend your family. Now, your house, you were just threatened. Your house was just attacked. He's coming to tell you, you don't need any guns. But here's the interesting part about that. Bayard Rustin is a homosexual. He doesn't have any children. He can't have any children because this is a time before, of course, homosexuals could adopt. So he'll never have any children. He doesn't understand what it's like to be a family man. So here comes a homosexual to tell a family man that he shouldn't defend himself against terrorists who have already threatened that man's life. I want y'all to think about that for a minute. That's why the homosexual is so dangerous in these movements. Because no matter how dire the circumstance, they're going to always tell us to capitulate to the European. Now, Bayard Rustin, the reason he couldn't be up on the front line and he had to keep recruiting other people to do, in essence, his dirty work, which was to try to form a movement that would go against the Black Power movement and to go against true freedom fighting and liberation, because Bayard Rustin was fighting to get next to Europeans. That was his whole goal. So instead of us trying to do something for ourselves, he wanted to get next to white folks, because what had happened before, he was caught in a car with two young white males and he got arrested. So at that point, he could not be a spokesman for anything, but he's behind the scenes of all these different groups. Like I said, behind the scenes at CORE, behind the scenes at SCLC, maneuvering and getting people to go against their natural instinct to defend themselves. Because again, at the time, the Klan was threatening people, shooting people, lynching people. It's just like today. We're going through the same thing 60 years later. And instead of supporting people who defend themselves like Robert F. Williams, he's telling Martin Luther King, you shouldn't have guns, even though Martin Luther King's life and family were just threatened. These are the type of dangerous infiltrators that we have in our movements. And that's why we talk about ASTROTURF movements, fake movements, and revolutionary cosplay. Now, another part of the Big Six was, of course, the NAACP. We all know the NAACP. But most of us don't know that most of the people who started the NAACP were Europeans. Mary White Overton and Moorfield Story and Henry Moskowitz. We're literally just a bunch of small hats. And to get a real good breakdown of that whole scenario, how that thing started, there's a brother from Warner Horizon, Brother Body Shots, did an excellent video called Secret Relationship Between Black Leaders and Small Hats. If you don't have that, you want to get it. He breaks down the foundation of it, of how the hat started, the NAACP, and how the NAACP at that time, along with other so-called civil rights leaders, fought against Marcus Garvey and started the Garvey Must Go movement to try to get the government to come investigate Garvey. And of course, the government did eventually come investigate Garvey, and they destroyed the UNIA and they deported Garvey. Now let's think about this for a minute here. You have two groups of people, both of them supposedly for the interests of Black people. But instead of one of them focusing all of their attention on fighting against racial oppression at the time, yep, Du Bois is part of that crew too. That's right, sister. Instead of that, they want to come and attack Mr. Garvey. And Mr. Garvey's focus wasn't even really on the European, other than the fact that the Black Legion was fighting against the KKK and having shootouts with the KKK. And so, but other than that, everything else was internal. Everything else was about building institutions, building businesses, and eventually getting to the point of having repatriation to Africa, and also to help uplift Africa, which was in the throes of colonialism at the time. Now, what's so deep about the psychology of it is, instead of you just staying out the way or moving out the way or not even having anything to do with him, if you disagreed with him, you want to come and destroy the man out of jealousy because he's organizing millions of quote unquote Negroes at the time. That's the psychology that we're dealing with these misleaders of these ASTROTURF movements. And we've seen it again and again. And these so-called leaders are propped up by Europeans, put in front of us, funded by Europeans. And the aspirations of freedom and justice and equality that Black people have, they're misdirected and redirected in the direction of capitulation with Europeans. And then we wonder why we're still in the same place. We haven't made any progress. Sometimes, in some ways, we've gone backwards. And we're trying to figure out why we can't move forward. Is because our so-called leaders are handpicked by the enemy. And these organizations have gone on and been around for 100 years. And really, as they've been around for 100 years, we haven't made any progress. And we wonder why. So now, of course, what's the latest iteration of this, or the latest manifestation of this ASTROTURF movement? We already know. What is everybody yelling right now? All the people that are at the protest yelling right now. Everybody's yelling, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, right? Now, years ago, Straight Black Pride looked into Black Lives Matter, and one of the people who let us know what was going on was the brother King D. Seals. Peace be upon him. Rise in power. That brother was one of the original organizers, BB448 sister, was one of the original organizers of the Mike Brown Ferguson movement. For those of us who remember, Mike Brown, I believe, was a teenager, was murdered by a white cop, shot dead in the street, in the middle of the neighborhood. A lot of people saw it. People came out to see what was going on. It was a hot summer day. They left Mike Brown out there in the middle of the street, dead. I don't even think they originally covered him up. And then the people began an uprising. And so as the people began to uprise, brothers like King D. Seals was out there organizing. He was telling Mike Brown's mother and telling the people, we can't let this ride. We can't let this go. And so they began protesting. And then suddenly, days into it, people start coming from out of town. So they're thinking, of course, that these people are coming from out of town to help them in their fight against the police. That's right, Darren Wilson. I couldn't remember his name, sister. And the sister said he laid there for over 5 hours. See, that's they don't let dogs lay in the street 5 hours if you call. And so BB Folday's sister, Philly Yay Babe is in the house. And so when that uprising started and those out of towners came, and Brother Irritated Genie had just played a clip recently of King D. Seals talking about this whole situation. And for those that don't know, Brother Irritated Genie's YouTube page has been discontinued by YouTube. Shout out to YouTube. But he had that interview up. And Darren Seals talked about how these people came in, co-opted the Mike Brown movement, started tweeting about what was going on. These people started getting all these followers, somewhere getting all this money. The Black Lives Matter hashtag pops up. That becomes the rallying cry. And next thing you know, their organic Ferguson movement for Mike Brown, for justice for Mike Brown, has been co-opted by some people from out of town, including some Europeans and homosexuals that they don't know, like people like D. Ray McKessick, that D. Seals said he was one of the main ones, infiltrators, that took the movement from first talking about police brutality, justice for Mike Brown, and then next thing you know, they talking about trans and queer rights and all this other stuff that ain't had nothing to do with what's going on. And so an organic movement was infiltrated. What was grassroots became ASTROTURF. They got money and jobs and all types of other things. And the people were there on the ground were left with nothing except to face the police alone. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the activists from that area that had did the work. They started being killed off one by one. But brothers had to leave town and hide and all types of other stuff. And unfortunately, they killed off the brother King D. Seals. And sometimes in some of these killings, they're paying dudes in the hood to do the dirty work, to murder our brothers, our freedom fighters, who was doing the work, fighting for justice. Police paying off people to kill them off. This is the types of things that derail, of course, our movements. This is new COINTELPRO, new counterintelligence program to destroy Black movements and Black leaders. So now, getting deeper into Black Lives Matter itself, I found something very interesting where I was just going back doing some review, looking at the founders of Black Lives Matter. And of course, we know it's a group of lesbians, and they, instead of what they do is they use the murders of Black men, largely straight Black men, to push for quote unquote rights for homosexuals and transgenders. So why don't they come out when the homosexual is murdered and then talk about that? No, when the Black man is murdered, they come out and talk about some trans rights and some other things that had nothing to do with the fact that a Black man was murdered or shot or hanged, or, you know, they kill us so many ways. You got a list of ways that they murder us. But these people don't come out when their people murder. Why? Because their people aren't the target. The straight people are the target because the straight people can reproduce. The white supremacist doesn't have to kill the homosexual because the homosexual has voluntarily ended their bloodline by choosing to be what? Homosexual. The straight person is the one that's going to reproduce. So you kill them when they're young, you stop the bloodline. Many of the Black men, in fact, a large percentage of the Black men that are murdered, like Eric Garner and Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, were fathers. Philando Castile was shot right in front of his girlfriend and her daughter. He wasn't no homosexual. But this group They're opportunists who literally prey on the dead bodies of dead black men to fuel their movement of homosexuality. Now, how is the homosexual not the enemy of black people with this type of behavior? But it's even deeper than just the homosexuality, because like I was talking about, in that secret relationship between black leaders and small hats, where we see the small hat at the core of these civil rights movements, along with the homosexual. And the sister said, and the brother killed in Atlanta on Friday was a father. Again, another example. And to be honest, so many people are being killed, and I'm getting sent so many videos and articles and things, I can barely keep up with who's who. It's people like somebody was killed yesterday, somebody was killed the day before that. They're murdering us at such a quick rate, we can't even focus. We still haven't got any justice for Sister Breonna Taylor. She was with her man. They were together when she was shot up. But they want to use her, of course, because she was a sister, and say, oh, women don't matter in this. We have to also focus on women. Who said that Sister Breonna Taylor's murder is not as important as these brothers? No one said that. No one said that. In fact, from my point of view, Sister Breonna Taylor's murder is more important than George Floyd. No disrespect to George Floyd, but George Floyd was with a white woman. Sister Breonna Taylor was with a black man. As a black man, we should ride for her harder than we ride for him. But they use that gender war to divide and allow us to be conquered and destroyed, and then push in the LGBT agenda instead of focusing on who? The enemy, the cracker. See, they don't want to talk about that cracker. Why don't they want to talk about that cracker, brother? I'm going to tell you why they don't want to talk about that cracker right now. Now, I got this from the Jewish Women's Archive, right? Did you hear what I said? I said I got this from the Jewish Women's Archive. What does it say? It says Black Lives Matter began as a response to the 2013 acquittal of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Alicia Garza, upon hearing the Zimmerman verdict, wrote a love letter to Black people on Facebook, an expression of her grief. Among her impassioned words, 3 stood out. Our lives matter. Her friend and fellow organizer Patrice Cullors altered the phrase and added the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm going to pause right there. You should be asking me, brother, why is this on the Jewish Women's Archive? We're going to get to that. The following summer, police officer Darren Wilson shot and killed 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Soon the words Black Lives Matter flooded social media and then made their way onto posters, banners, t-shirts of protesters at the sit-ins and marches that swelled across the country in the aftermath of the shooting. Through Ferguson, awareness of Black Lives Matter spread, not as a hashtag, but as a movement. What did I say? They used the murder of Mike Brown to push that agenda. Now, move a little further down. It says, she and her co-founders have emphasized that while Black Lives Matter was founded to address the killing of young Black men, it is also committed to achieving gender equality and inclusivity. For Garza, the personal is political. Raised by her African-American mother and her Jewish stepfather, she grew up as Alicia Schwartz and identifies as Jewish. She also identifies as queer and is married to fellow organizer Malachi Garza, a trans male. Intersectionality, an issue that is close to home for Gaza, is a priority in the movement. Did y'all hear what I just read? Alicia Garza, who has a black mother, and apparently, but they don't say it, has a black father, was raised by her Jewish stepfather as Alicia Schwartz and identifies as Jewish, even though she's darker than me. Brothers and sisters, this is what I call a psychological mulatto. What is a psychological mulatto? A psychological mulatto is what they try to produce when they adopt our children. We have a person that is born black, but the mind is white, and to the point where they identify as white, even though they're jet black. Candace Owens, psychological mulatto. And so it tells us right here, she's supposedly supposed to be for black people, but she identifies as Jewish, and then she marries. This is how sick her mind is. She marries a European female who pretends to be a male, but she's going to tell us she cares about black men. But she cares about black men when they're dead. She doesn't care about them when they're alive. See, because I remember when I had read the Black Lives Matter website, and there was no discussion of black men or black families. But when black men are dead, then it's time to come out and organize and get money from other Europeans. And where does the money go? There has been discussions about, and in fact, I believe on the DNC website, there is a button, a link to donate to Black Lives Matter. Our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby, says, smash the like button, brothers and sisters, smash the like button. There, on the DNC website, they have a link for you to donate to Black Lives Matter. Thereby, from my point of view, the Democratic National Convention, the Democratic Party, they are endorsing Black Lives Matter. These people are, in essence, are in bed together. Now, the thing about it is, what's so deep is, who is the Democratic nominee? The Democratic nominee is Joe Biden, former Vice President of Barack Obama, author of the 94 crime bill that instigated mass incarceration. But what's so deep about that is he wrote the bill in 94 for mass incarceration, but William Jefferson Clinton, the president at the time, had set up an air base to allow the CIA to bring in drugs into the country in the 80s when he was the governor of Arkansas. So he's basically the big drug dealer working with the CIA to bring in the drugs that come into the black community. And then this guy in Congress writes the bill to lock us up for the drugs that he helped bring into the community. And they tell us about how bad Trump is. Trump is bad, but Trump is overt. We can see him coming. These people are slick. We don't see them coming. It's like Malcolm X said, the fox and the wolf. That's right, Sister Mina, Arkansas. That's right. In fact, you used to be able to find the documentary on YouTube, goes into a whole details, a couple of hours long. Breaks down the whole thing. And of course, we know now that the Clintons and Bushes are related, and we know the whole thing started underneath George Bush, the one I call Daddy Bush, the one in between Prescott and the other George. So now we see the connections here. We see that Black Lives Matter is in bed with the Democratic Party that came up with mass incarceration, and those people are blood relatives of the people that came up with the CIA Contra thing. We're surrounded by enemies. And yet these people want to tell us that they're fighting for our rights, even though one of the three founders of Black Lives Matter doesn't even identify as black, even though she has no apparent white blood. But because she grew up with a Jewish stepfather, she identifies as Jewish. And so you see, as Malcolm X said, we're trapped, we're double trapped. Because we have enemies who are open enemies. And then we have so-called friends or activists or leaders who are hidden enemies. So the Alicia Garzas of the world are following in the tradition of a Bayard Rustin, of a Philip Randolph, people who supposedly activists for Black people who are secretly working to destroy powerful Black organizations or Black self-sufficiency organizations while pushing the interracial agenda, which is really just an agenda for them to get in bed with the cracker, which is always the goal of the integrationists. That's why the integrationists and the African nationalists can never get along, because we're trying to get away from the European and eventually get the European away from everybody on the planet, and they're trying to go lay up with the European. And that's why we have an eternal conflict, an internal and eternal conflict in our communities. This is a discussion that goes back 6,000 years. You can go to ancient Egypt and the same thing is going on. Some of the Black people, hey, we got to get these people out of here. These people are weird, they're strange. And then other people are like, oh, we should just welcome them. We can teach them. We can civilize them, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you come up, you have the Moors, you got the same discussion. Now, here we are. We trying to tell the integrationists, hey, man, you got to watch out for these people. They know who these people are because they in bed with them. They have sided with the enemy. But they out in front of the masses of our people, and because they're sided with the enemy, they're the people that are on TV. They're the people that are in the media. They're the people that get the blue checks on Twitter. They're the people that have the 50,000 followers. And so their voice is amplified while our voices are quieted. Why? Because we represent the true aspirations of the people, which is freedom, justice, and equality, which can only be achieved through sovereignty, not through integration. But our people don't know that part because they don't get to hear that part of the message. And we've lost so much of our racial esteem that we start believing that we can't do anything for ourselves. And it was so deep. I heard Drew Brees, the quarterback, who had said some things, and a lot of people jumped on him. And then in his statement where he retracted what he said previously, he said, we have to all be a part of this because Black people can't do it alone. That's the problem right there. Our people believe that Black people can do it alone if you would leave us alone. But the Peckerwood won't do that. See, I believe we're getting to the point where things are so dire that we have to think about having a plebiscite amongst Black people about separation and reparations. See, many people are talking about the reparations part, but when you talk about the separation part, then all of a sudden people get confused. Why? Because many of the people that are talking about the reparations themselves are laid up with the European. So they don't want to talk about the separation part. But they'll tell you, talk bad about other Black people, quote unquote, Black immigrants and all this other stuff. But they won't talk bad about that cracker. And you wonder why they won't talk bad about them. Because they laid up with them. You can research who I'm talking about. Y'all know what it is. Later on this year, we're going to name the names and shame the devil. And so Now, as we look at all this so-called acceptance of Black Lives Matter, we see, again, it's another trick. And we see millions of dollars being funneled into this organization, and no one knows where the money went to the first time. And then we see other people like the European Sean King masquerading as some type of black man, getting his John B impersonation on. He's collecting money to tell us about murders of black people, but no one has shown us anything that he's produced for black people. And now people are starting to question him. Well, the whole thing, you don't have to question him. He's a European. That tells you what you need to know. But these people jump out in front of the movement and jump out in front of the people. And soon as something happens, they're out there and they are rallying people and getting support and getting money. And it goes to who knows what and where. And then meanwhile, the masses of our people are still suffering and dying. We're still being murdered and shot and hanged. They hung a brother just recently. And then try to say it was a suicide. Let's just be clear. Black people don't commit suicide by going out in the middle of nowhere or in their yard or anywhere else and hanging themselves. We have a racial memory of how horrible that is. And so if you want to kill yourself, that's not the way it's going to happen. Somebody says, but also the problem is global. As long as there are folks, as other folks are in power, there's nowhere to go for true separation. That is true. But you can, how can I put this? You can make a strategic retreat to rally your forces. Of course, we understand that the European is dominating everywhere. All over the earth, white supremacy is global. But we also understand that there are places on the earth where we are the numerical majority. And that if those people, if their minds are initiated and they understand the nature of the threat, it changes the power dynamic that is currently going on. Because the fact of the matter is there are over 1.2 billion Africans on the planet. The problem is not the numbers. The problem is the organization. And the problem is the psychology of worshiping our enemy. Now, I think Baba Kwaiti talked about seeing the enemy as the deity. That's a large part of our problem. As I talked about last week, stop worshiping white folks. When we talked about staying on code. But I wanted to get into these ASTROTURF movements because for years we've been told that these people are fighting for us, when in reality, they're not. And it's so bad that we've seen complete, total, how can I put it? Just complete, total fraudulence in the type of people that are coming out in front of our people. Now, I know that for the last couple of weeks, many people have seen a group of so-called Black Panthers that came out in front of the people who were at the protest. I believe they first came out with the protest for Ahmaud Arbery down in Atlanta. And this group of people claimed that they were part of a new Black Panther group, right? And we saw the sister out there, and she was dressed in all black, and she had the quote unquote assault rifle, and they were protecting the protesters, if you will. And then next thing you know, we see a picture of her laid up. I mean, not laid up, excuse me, but hugged up with the cop. Now, one thing we know for a fact is that no Panther formation has ever been in league with the police. Indeed, the Panthers of 1966, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, their whole foundation was fighting against what? Police brutality. And they described the police as an occupying army in our community. But yet, here come these people claiming they're Panthers, taking photo ops with European and even having a European amongst their ranks. What am I talking about? I'm talking about revolutionary cosplay. Let's take a look at it. It says actors dressed as Black Panther in Atlanta protests say they're sorry. This is on Vice's website for those that want to look at it. This is June 12th, 2020 at 12:02. It said last week, a group of armed men and one woman wearing body armor and carrying what looked like AR-15s appeared at a Black Lives Matter protest in Georgia. Some of the group, who were all clad in black, wore berets and supposed imagery of the Black Panther movement, while a single white guy among them wearing the same uniform stood out. Quote, I just want everyone that's here to know that we are the new Black Panthers, said the lone woman in the group through a megaphone at one of the protests in Decatur. Further quote says, we're here as a visual representation of equality. You have a right to bear arms. You do not need a license to carry a rifle. You need a license for a handgun. When we represent our rights as a people, see and they understand. Now, days after the group mysteriously appeared carrying weapons at the Atlanta BLM march, right? Except it now claimed to be a new group, the Black Panther Revolutionaries in Atlanta chapter. In a Facebook post, the actual leader of the new Black Panther Party, Hashim Nzinga, denounced the fake Black Panthers as most likely an FBI-led group and clarified that his organization, under no circumstances, has white members. Images and video of the group went viral on Twitter and were picked up by tabloids. In a viral thread, a Twitter user suggested that these people were actors and had some convincing evidence, including that the patches of the group weren't Black Panther insignias, but from the 66th Infantry Division. At least two of these people are Atlanta-based film and television actors, Vice has confirmed. The two explained why they were at the protest and why they wore what they wore. Both said they were not actually affiliated with any official Black Panther movement, but like almost everyone else at the protest, they cared deeply about the Black Lives Matter. They cared deeply about the what? The Black Lives Matter movement and the fight for racial justice. All right? Go move a little further down in the article. It says, the one white man in the group, Michael Perino Miller, whose IMDb credits include roles in shorts and an appearance as an uncredited extra in Avengers Endgame, published an Instagram story promoting the Black Panther Revolutionaries. But when asked what the group was exactly, he made his profile private and told Vice it was all a misunderstanding. Right? Now he says that he made it clear that nobody was paid to wear the faux Black Panther outfits or attend any protests. That's his claim. That's what the white man claimed, right? Now Miller referred Vice, to Spike G, an actor, writer, stuntman, cameraman, director, who appeared at both protests in a Panther uniform. Posts on his account showed that he uploaded the episodes of a fictional action series called Justice about an African-American vigilante who stands up against police brutality and injustice in the Black community. We all know cops get away with murder, but not in Freedom City. In Freedom City, they have an answer to justice. Now, that's what I mean by revolutionary cosplay. And Sister Misty says, activist. They have admitted, right? Admitted real life actors, some dude that was in Avengers Endgame somewhere, Avengers Endgame extra, dressed up in a fake Panther uniform, so-called leading the protests in Georgia. Now understand, I have no idea whether their weapons were loaded, unloaded, real, unreal, or not. But just think about this for a minute, right? You're in Georgia. You're in the Deep South at a hotbed of activity where we have the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. The people are uprising. You show them and talk about armed self-defense. But are your guns loaded? Have you been properly trained? Are you serious? What if the Klan shows up like they did when Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad went down there for James Byrd in Texas? Are you ready to defend the people? Have you made some type of contingency for people to escape if the police come? Can you hold off the police till the people escape? Have you done any of these things that they did back in the 60s that they don't tell us about, when the Black people came up armed to defend the so-called nonviolent marchers? Or are you playing games with the life of Black people? Are you going to defend them if it goes down? Are you capable of defending them if it goes down? Or are you doing revolutionary cosplay? See, these people are playing games with the lives of Black people in a time where race soldiers are destroying us and even threatening to up the ante with more violence. And we have some actors out here. See, people forget Huey P. Newton was not an actor. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were real men who got real guns and went out to face the police and put their lives on the line, had shootouts with the police, and were arrested over and over again. And Huey P. Newton was eventually murdered for standing up. And you got these people out here playing games. Huey P. Newton got into a confrontation with another group of, they called themselves Panthers in San Francisco, because when they went to secure Mama Betty Shabazz after the murder of Malcolm X, these people had the guns, but the guns wasn't loaded. Those people were playing games. These people are playing games. Risking the lives of Black people, because with your protesting and you see people armed, you immediately are looking to them for leadership, and these people are some actors. ASTROTURF movements and revolutionary cosplay. These are types of tricks that we have to look out for, brothers and sisters. These are the type of people who will get out in front of our people and lead us back into the trap of white domination, when the spirit of the people is to get away from the trap of white domination. We have activists, as the sister said, and enemies in our midst, pretending to be leaders, paid by the enemy to go against the aspirations of the masses of Black people. And these types of things, and I bet you, I can't prove it, but I guarantee you there's some homosexuals in that crew. Because is a move that the homophiles would do, going all the way back to A. Philip Randolph and Barrett Rustin, going back 100 years. We have 100 years of documentation of Europeans using homophiles to derail our movements and use all types of tricks. And in fact, I was talking to Brother Genie. He said, and I don't know if he talked about it in one of his discussions or not, but we were talking and he said, watch, this time they're going to try to get something more militant to put in front of our people while still pushing the homophile agenda to try to get our people to gravitate towards that. And then he said it, and then here it was right here. So brothers and sisters, that's really the basis of what I wanted to cover, was just how we have to, instead of supporting these things that are put in front of us, we have to support real movements, real organizations, real leaders, and understand that if the European puts them in front of us, they put a mic in their hand, they give them money, give them resources, those people are not leaders. Those people are misleaders. The Al Sharptons, I believe I talked about Al Sharpton last week in his magic briefcase. If I didn't talk about Al Sharpton in his magic briefcase, I'll talk about it quickly. Al Sharpton was working. He was confidential informant for the FBI, went and met a brother, had a briefcase to record the situation, and was asking the brother about where Assata Shakur was back in the 80s. We see him all the time. He's been, since Tawana Brawley, that was 30 some years ago. These are the type of people that they put in front of us. Now he has his own show on MSNBC. We're supposed to believe that he is going to help us achieve our aspirations of liberation. He's CI. All of these people that they put in front of us are enemies. Sister said people who are really for the people are not on the news or in the media in general. Exactly. And in fact, I can point to the time when they made the decision to take the strongest voices and move cameras and things away from them, when Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad appeared, I believe the second time on Donahue in either 95 or 96. And when he came on Donahue and he had that support from the audience and he tore apart those Europeans that were asking questions, they have not put a microphone in front of a strong Black voice since that point. So they have always, the new thing now is to get people who they can control the narrative of what the people say, and people that will go along with the mission that the European has for us to get us turned around and running around in circles instead of moving forward together as a people toward liberation. And then what you will see is if a grassroots individual comes up and catches the imagination of the masses of people, you will see them attacked by the misleadership class, the way that they attacked Garvey back in the day. That's a standard part of the playbook of the misleadership group, who are paid to control the minds of African people. That's why you had Billy Porter marched out there while everybody is talking about, somebody said Steve Coakley was disinvited to the Oprah show. I can't believe that Steve Coakley was ever invited to the Oprah show. Now that's information for me. But you had Billy Porter come out there in the midst of all this, where our people are uprising and just really expressing themselves and trying to come together. And he started talking about how the Black community is quote unquote homophobic. Now, people are being murdered We're trying to fight to keep people from being murdered. And here you come talking about, you black community. What does that have to do with this man being choked out to death for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and killed? That's what I'm talking about. They can't take 1 second to focus on what's going on. They're not getting some attention. They just pop up out of nowhere. What about us? What about us? What about us? You're not being murdered. And of course, he's an effeminized black male who's bending over for the European. Come out wearing a whole tuxedo dress and whatnot, getting all this publicity. And then, of course, when black people are mad and it looks like black people might tear up something, they roll him out talking about we homophobic. Nah, we crackerphobic, because this cracker is out of control. So I saw this morning, she kept showing the video. I was like, oh, well, the brother fought the crack. Of course the brother fought the crack. He was almost in the same position George Floyd was in. They handcuff you, they get you on the ground, next thing you know, you're dead. So he's like, nah, I'm not going out like that. At that point, he was like, freedom or death. I'm going to fight him, I'm going to get free or I'm going to die. And every black person is suffering from PTSD. Every black person, every black man especially, knows that any interaction with the police could be a death sentence. So I don't care what they say. I don't care what type of excuses they have. I don't care if they say, oh, he justified, he shouldn't have resisted. He should have resisted. I'm not getting on the ground. And then we have these Europeans out here taking a knee in solidarity. The knee is what killed George Floyd. Don't take no knee. We ain't taking no knees. Black man, get up off of your knees and stand upright and look this Peckerwood in the eye. And if they want to come with some type of reconciliation, tell them, where are the resources? Where are the resources? You want to do something? Where are the resources for black families? The black man, the black woman, and the black child. Where are your resources for that? Not for these homophiles and these pedophiles in our community running around, running amok, and these dudes wearing dresses and wigs. What resources do you have for the black man, black woman, and black child who are being murdered senselessly and brutally? What you got on our books, as they used to say on the block? We're going to have that discussion with the Europeans, just straight up reparations and separation. Straight like that. I think now is as good a time as any. It's a presidential election. We have one person that openly doesn't like us and one person that secretly doesn't like us, and it's really not that big of a secret. What better time to discuss separation and reparation? So with that, brothers and sisters, that's my time. I'm your host, DC Radical One. I thank everybody who came out to listen to this discussion. I appreciate your support. As it says on the screen, you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical1. You can follow me on Twitter at DC_radical_ONE. That's at DC_radical_ONE. And very quickly, before I end this discussion, I want to talk about the fact that Straight Black Pride has an event coming up. Our brother Irritated Genie will be speaking at Everlasting Life Cafe, and the discussion will be on African survival in the 21st century. And this will be at Everlasting Life. Doors open at 2 p.m. Everlasting Life is located at 9185 Central Avenue, Capitol Heights, Maryland, 20743. Tickets will be available, or are available, excuse me, via Eventbrite. 25 $25 in advance, 35 at the door. This is an event that you do not want to miss. The brother's going to lay out the 4 areas where we're most under assault and how we can repel that assault. Sister say, what's the capacity for seating? I would say get your tickets early if you're in the area, because the seating capacity will largely be dependent upon the guidelines that are set by the county. So this is the end. This will be the end of July. So we're about a month and a half away. We may be at stage 3 of that. Possibly depend. That's just the government sets that up. And then if it's at 50% capacity, it may only allow maybe 40, 50 tickets. Maybe. As for it being live streamed, yeah, it will not be live streamed because people are paying to come. So the entire event will not be live streamed. It will, but it will be recorded and will be made available for DVD and also for digital download. So it will be recorded. If you're not in the area, you will be able to purchase it later on after it's recorded and processed and edited and all those things. So again, that is July 25th, 2020, 2 p.m. African Survival in the 21st Century. Our brother, the Irritated Genie. And of course, since his YouTube page has been discontinued, you might want to see him live, because who knows what other social media he may be removed from as he exposes the plots and plans of our enemies to destroy us. So with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you all again. I am your host, DC Radical One. With that, I say a BB for Hodie and straight black pride.